somewhere beneath layers of volcanic rock, ice, and 4,000 years of silence, something enormous may still be waiting to be found. For centuries, explorers have frozen on mountainsides, risked their lives in blizzards, and disappeared into crevasses chasing a single question. Did a wooden vessel the size of a modern cargo ship really survive a flood that reshaped the entire planet? And if it did, why? Does almost everyone misunderstand what that ship actually was? You think you know the story. A man, a boat, two of every animal, 40 days of rain. That is the version told in Sunday school. That is the version painted in cartoons. But the real account, the one written in ancient Hebrew thousands of years ago, is stranger, darker, and far more precise than anything you were taught as a child. And by the end of this journey, you will understand why this story has survived every empire, every war, and every attempt to erase it. Because this was never just a story about a boat. It was a message about judgment, mercy, and the terrifying possibility that the world you trust in could end in a single generation. Let's go back to the beginning. Not the beginning of the flood, the beginning of why it happened at all. The book of Genesis describes a world that had become almost unrecognizable from the garden where it started. Genesis chapter 6 says, "The earth was filled with violence, and that every inclination of the human heart was only evil, continually." This was not a world of ordinary sin. This was a civilization in complete moral collapse. Ancient Near Eastern scholars point out that the language used here is some of the most severe in the entire Hebrew Bible. It does not simply say people did bad things. It says corruption had become total. Imagine living in that world. Imagine watching everything around you decay, family by family, city by city, until cruelty became normal and kindness became rare. That is the world Noah was born into. And according to the text, one man remained different. Genesis 6 says, Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord, and that he was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time. But here's the detail almost no one talks about. The Hebrew word used for Noah's righteousness, tzadik, does not mean he was perfect. It means he consistently chose the right path in a world where almost no one else did. Noah was not a superhero. He was simply the last honest man standing. Then comes the instruction that would change history. God tells Noah to build an ark, not a boat in the way we imagine boats. The Hebrew word used teva is the exact same word used later in Exodus for the basket that carried the infant Moses down the Nile. It does not mean a ship built for speed or navigation. It means a vessel built purely to survive. This detail matters because it tells us something profound about the entire story. This was never meant to be a vehicle. It was meant to be a refuge. And the dimensions given in Genesis 6 are startlingly specific. 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, 30 cubits high, using the common ancient cubit measurement that translates to roughly 450 feet in length, 75 feet in width, and 45 feet in height. To put that into modern perspective, naval engineers in the 20th century calculated that these proportions match almost perfectly with the ideal ratio for a large seafaring vessel designed for stability rather than speed. In fact, the ark's length-to-width ratio of 6:1 is strikingly similar to ratios still used in modern ship design today. This is where the story becomes far more serious than most retellings suggest. Whoever wrote this text either had access to advanced maritime knowledge thousands of years before naval engineering existed as a science, or they were describing something they had genuinely witnessed. But the ark was not the hardest part to imagine. The hardest part was what came next. Noah was instructed to bring pairs of every kind of land animal and 7 pairs of clean animals into the vessel. 4 generations. This detail sparked ridicule. How could one ship hold every species on earth? But modern biblical scholars point out something the ancient audience would have understood immediately. Something lost in translation for centuries. The Hebrew phrase used is not modern species. It refers to kinds, a broader ancient category, closer to what we would call families or genera today. This does not mean every subspecies of every animal on the planet. It means representative kinds, capable of repopulating the earth. When calculated using that framework, the numbers become far more feasible than most skeptics assume. Even more revealing is the timeline embedded quietly within the story, something almost never discussed in casual reading. According to the genealogical record in Genesis 5, Noah was already 600 years old when the flood began. 600 years of watching the world decay. 600 years of faith without any visible reward. Imagine building something for over a century, something the entire world mocked, based purely on a promise you could not prove. According to Jewish tradition preserved in later rabbinic commentary, Noah spent decades constructing the ark in full view of his neighbors, warning them the entire time. Not one person outside his family believed him. That detail alone should stop you. This was not a quiet miracle. It was public, prolonged, and completely ignored. Then the day finally came. Genesis 7 describes something almost cinematic in its intensity. The fountains of the great deep burst open, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened. This phrase, fountains of the great deep, has fascinated geologists and theologians alike for centuries. It does not describe rainfall alone. It describes a catastrophic release of subterranean water, combined with continuous torrential rain for 40 days and 40 nights. Picture that moment. The sky, once familiar and predictable, suddenly transforming into something violent and endless. The ground itself splitting open in places, releasing water from below as though the earth had been holding its breath for generations. For the people outside the ark, there would have been no warning sirens, no emergency broadcasts, no time to climb higher ground fast enough. Just water, rising faster than anyone could escape. And inside that wooden vessel, 8 people and thousands of animals sat in near total darkness, listening to the storm above them, wondering if they would survive the night. According to the text, the waters rose for 150 days, covering even the highest mountains under the sky. Whether this describes a global catastrophe or an overwhelming regional flood that appeared global to the people experiencing it remains one of the most debated questions among biblical scholars and geologists today. Ancient Mesopotamian societies, including the Sumerians and Babylonians, recorded their own catastrophic flood traditions, most famously in the Epic of Gilgamesh. The remarkable similarities between these ancient accounts have led many historians to believe they may all be describing the same real historical catastrophe from different cultural perspectives. But here is what almost no one focuses on. The most emotionally powerful part of this story is not the flood itself. It is the silence that follows. Genesis 8 describes a moment often skipped over in casual tellings. After the rain stopped, the waters did not disappear immediately. They receded slowly, over months, while Noah and his family remained sealed inside that ark, unable to see the outside world, unable to know how much had truly been lost. Imagine that, waiting, not knowing if there was land left anywhere, not knowing if you were the last family alive on earth, not knowing if this new world would ever be safe again. Then comes one of the most quietly powerful images in ancient literature. Noah sends out a raven, and later a dove, to search for dry land. The dove returns the first time with nothing. Then, after 7 more days, it returns again, this time carrying a freshly plucked olive leaf. That olive leaf, small enough to fit in a human hand, became one of the most enduring symbols in human history. Even today, thousands of years later, the olive branch remains a universal image of peace and renewal, its origins tracing directly back to this single, quiet moment inside an ancient wooden ship. Finally, after over a year inside the ark, God instructs Noah to leave. And what happens next reveals something almost never emphasized in modern reading. Noah's first act upon stepping onto dry ground was not celebration, it was worship. Genesis 8 describes him building an altar and offering a sacrifice of gratitude before doing anything else, before rebuilding a home, before searching for food, before anything. Then comes the moment the entire story has been building toward. God establishes what the Bible calls an everlasting covenant, promising never again to destroy the earth by flood. And as a sign of that promise, a rainbow appears in the sky. This is the detail that changes everything, the one buried beneath centuries of casual storytelling. The rainbow was never simply a symbol of hope in a generic sense. In the ancient Near Eastern world, the bow was primarily a weapon of war. Scholars studying ancient Hebrew imagery suggest that by placing this weapon in the sky, unstrung and pointed upward rather than downward, toward humanity, the text is delivering an extraordinary message. It is a divine weapon being laid down, a declaration that judgment has ended and mercy has begun. That single image, hidden in plain sight for thousands of years, transforms the entire meaning of the story. This was never simply a tale about a boat surviving a storm. It was a story about the difference between destruction and mercy, and about a promise that, according to the text, still stands today. For thousands of years, explorers have chased physical evidence of this event, most famously on the slopes of Mount Ararat in modern-day Turkey, the location named in Genesis 8 as where the ark came to rest. Expeditions throughout the 20th and 21st centuries have investigated satellite imagery, isoformations and rock structures, hoping to find remnants of the ancient vessel. To this day, no confirmed physical evidence has been scientifically verified, and most legitimate archaeologists remain skeptical of specific site claims. Yet the search itself reveals something remarkable about human nature. Across cultures, religions, and centuries, people have never stopped wanting this story to be true. Perhaps that desire reveals something deeper than curiosity about ancient ships. Perhaps it reveals a universal human hope that no matter how corrupt the world becomes, mercy always has the final word. Because when you strip away the animals, the dimensions, the wood, and the water, what remains is a story about a single family who chose to believe in something they could not prove, and were saved not because they were flawless, but because they remained faithful when almost no one else did. That is the truth. Almost no one tells you about Noah's Ark. It was never really about surviving a flood. It was about the possibility that even in the darkest chapter of human history, one honest life can still change everything that comes after it. If this journey into the deeper truth behind Noah's Ark opened your eyes to something new, imagine what else remains hidden in these ancient pages, waiting for someone willing to look closer. Subscribe if you would like to keep exploring these stories together.